breaking news, five-time NBA champion Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash.
A high-profile aviation accident devastates Los Angeles.
I'm just at a loss for words right now.
NTSB investigators quickly inspect the wreckage.
All the mechanical systems and electronic systems appear to be working fine.
The data provides a detailed picture of the entire flight.
So they get airborne just after 9, and then they get held up for 12 minutes.
November 2, Echo X-ray.
Hold outside Burbank airspace.
Okay, we'll hold outside Burbank.
Certainly this added to the time of the flight.
He's bombing along here at about 140 knots.
Investigators must consider the unthinkable.
Was he trying to make up for the lost time?
A lot of people wondered if Kobe, being Kobe, might have put pressure on this pilot.
But there's no evidence to support that suspicion.
So what happened to this guy?
Hey, Rick. So I'm gonna go straight north to Dodger Stadium, around Burbank, and follow the 118 to get up and around the weather down here.
What's the visibility at Burbank?
Broken clouds with 5-mile visibility. We're good to go.
Ara Zabayan is a helicopter pilot with more than 8,000 flying hours.
They'll be here in about 15 minutes. I'll meet them here and help get them loaded.
Roger that.
He's the chief pilot for Island Express, a helicopter charter company based in California's Los Angeles County.
Island Express is a family-owned company that's been in Southern California for a number of decades, and they're known as a company that can provide VIP helicopter service.
Amongst their high-profile regular customers, media star Kylie Jenner, LA Clippers superstar Kawhi Leonard, and today's client, LA Lakers great Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant was one of the best basketball players of all time. He's an iconic Los Angeles Laker. He was drafted by the team in 1996 when he was 17 years old. He became the heart and soul of the team for 20 years. He won 5 world championships. He went to the All-Star game 18 times and really just became a huge star in his own right, apart from the team, and that he was recognized simply by his first name, Kobe.
How's everyone doing today?
Ara Zabayan has flown Kobe and his family dozens of times.
Well, let's get going.
Kobe and the pilot of this helicopter had really become friends because he had piloted him so many times around Southern California that they developed a relationship.
Kobe Bryant flies in a luxury Sikorsky S-76B. It's configured to carry 8 passengers.
The Sikorsky 76B is sort of like an air limousine in that it's quite common for VIP travel. I think heads of state use it in different countries, and it's also used as sort of an air ambulance in some situations. It's spacious and reliable. It really considered about as safe as they come.
Kobe, his daughter Gianna, and 6 others are headed to a basketball tournament near Camarillo, 80 miles away. Kobe is the team's coach, Gianna the star player. Today's 30-minute flight will take the helicopter north past Burbank and then west towards Camarillo. Zabayan will follow 2 highways for guidance, the 5 northwest and the 101 west to Camarillo.
Hey everyone, it's about to get loud back there. Copter 72 Echo X-ray, Island Express for East 1 departure.
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray, cleared for departure from Island Express. Have a good flight.
Good flight to Echo X-ray.
Just after 9 a.m., the helicopter lifts off from Santa Ana. The destination is Kobe Bryant's Mamba Sports Academy. It's a regular journey for Zabayan. He flew this same group there and back yesterday.
He was a very experienced pilot. He was able to fly the helicopter at speed, at low altitude, in a very dense airspace, and deal with weather at the same time.
Since his early days as a player, Kobe Bryant has preferred helicopter travel to the crowded freeways of Southern California. He routinely uses helicopters for his personal and professional travel.
Kobe loved to fly by helicopter just because he loved how much time it saved him.
Kurt Dietz also flew for Island Express.
Flying in LA is like nowhere else. There is a large congestion of multiple types of airspace in a small area. So you're always in and out of airspace.
Today's flight will first need to pass through the controlled airspace surrounding Burbank, and then Van Nuys.
Burbank Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray Sikorsky helicopter approaching the zoo for a 101 westbound transition.
Zobayan requests permission to pass through Burbank's airspace.
It's a very busy airport, and the controllers, they know what they're doing.
November 72 Echo X-ray Burbank Tower. Burbank Class Charlie is IFR. Say intentions.
Burbank is only accepting IFR flights, or Instrument Flight Rules, which requires pilots to navigate solely on instruments. Zobayan, however, is only authorized to fly using Visual Flight Reference, or VFR.
The threshold for the visual flight is normally 3 miles. The Burbank Airport was 2.5 miles.
With insufficient visibility for VFR, the controller denies his request. But Zobayan's been flying helicopters in Southern California long enough to know a way around this restriction.
Asking for special VFR transition to the 101 westbound.
A special VFR allows him to operate at lower than standard visibilities, down to 1 mile visibility.
And that's an agreement you have with the tower saying, I'm here, I want to go there, I'm requesting a special VFR.
Special VFR allows Zobayan to navigate visually through the area of low visibility.
November 2 Echo X-ray. Hold outside Burbank airspace. I have an aircraft going around and an inbound citation.
The controller authorizes Zobayan to cross into Burbank airspace. But under the rules of Special VFR, he must now wait until the airspace is clear of traffic.
Okay, we'll hold outside Burbank, 2 Echo X-ray. Hey everyone, we'll have to circle here for a few minutes while we wait for a few planes to get out of our way. It shouldn't delay us too much.
Anytime you have a hold, it puts a great deal of pressure on you as a pilot because you're going to be late.
Finally, after holding for 12 minutes, the Burbank airspace clears and Zobayan is allowed to pass through.
Number 2 Echo X-ray. Cleared through Burbank. Maintain special VFR.
Copy that. We'll maintain special VFR. Copter 2 Echo X-ray.
From Burbank, the helicopter will follow the I-5 freeway northwest, and then the 118 around the top of Van Nuys airspace, then south to follow the 101 to Camarillo.
Landmarks for flying aircraft in LA is really important.
Kobe Bryant and the other passengers are anticipated to arrive in Camarillo just a few minutes behind schedule.
Van Nuys, Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray with you for the special VFR transition.
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray cleared into Van Nuys along the 118 freeway westbound.
The helicopter is cleared to pass through the airspace near Van Nuys. Zobayan now dials in the final controller for this journey, the Southern California Radar Approach Controller, who will handle the flight until it reaches Camarillo.
SoCal, Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray with you at 570 to Camarillo.
Helicopter 72 Echo
X-ray, SoCal approach. Roger, are you just going to stay down that low all the way to Camarillo?
The helicopter is flying 570 feet above the ground.
Yes, sir. Low altitude, 2 Echo X-ray.
Zobayan needs to stay below the clouds, which are around 1,000 feet above the ground.
The way he went was the lowest route available because of the weather.
Roger, I'm going to lose radar with you shortly.
But at the low altitude in hilly terrain, controllers won't be able to maintain radar contact with the flight.
The controllers would not see him on radar, he was so low.
Copy that, 2 Echo X-ray.
Less than 10 minutes from his destination, the visibility gets worse.
In the Los Angeles Basin area, it's well known to get this marine layer of colder water temperatures, warmer air, where you get these low clouds and you get lower visibilities.
Zobayan radios in his intention to climb above some low clouds.
We're going to go ahead and start our climb to go above the layers.
Two Echo X-ray, where are you?
Just west of Van Nuys, 2 Echo X-ray.
2 Echo X-ray, ident.
The controller hasn't been tracking the helicopter. He needs Zobayan to flash his transponder signal so he can locate it on his screen.
You press a button on your transponder that flashes on their radar screen so they know where you are.
Ident.
Two Echo X-ray, say intentions?
We're climbing to 4,000, 2 Echo X-ray.
And what are you gonna do when you reach altitude?
In the hills near Calabasas, witnesses see a helicopter emerge from the clouds and hit the ground. The team tracking Kobe Bryant's flight realizes something's gone wrong. The helicopter should have landed at Camarillo by now. It has disappeared from their flight tracker.
We have some breaking news. A helicopter crash in Southern California. Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies responding to reports of that crash just before 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's located in the Calabasas area.
It doesn't take long before the media is reporting the tragic news. Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter, along with 7 other people, have been killed in the helicopter crash.
It's just one of those things where you can read the words and you kind of process them, but you don't really. It's hard for it to sink in because you gotta think about that he's never coming back.
He was the guy, he was my icon, my role model who got me into the sport, who got me playing. I'm just at a loss for words right now.
You won't see another player like him again. He will be missed.
There is this tremendous outpouring of grief in Los Angeles. People flocked to Staples Center, left all kinds of different mementos.
This is much bigger than basketball, I think, just because I think Kobe was a real symbol, you know, of just hard work and dedication.
Everybody was really just heartsick by what happened.
Love you, Kobe. Love you, Gigi, and all the family.
We're here to conduct a safety investigation. And our mission is not to just determine what happened, but why it happened and how it happened to prevent a similar accident from ever happening again.
The NTSB begins its investigation at the crash site, looking for any clues to explain why a state-of-the-art helicopter, being flown by a highly experienced pilot, crashed 24 miles short of its destination.
The first thing you do at the crash site is try to see, did all the components make it to the crash site? Was there any kind of mechanical failure? You know, did a rotor blade break or a tail rotor come off?
The team uses a drone to scan the accident site and study the shape of the debris.
Looking at this accident site, it's very clear this was a relatively high rate of descent. The helicopter hit and the wreckage then bounced about 90 feet to where it came to a rest. So there was a lot more vertical speed here than you have at horizontal speed. And all the parts of the helicopter made it to the accident site.
Investigators study flight control surfaces, the engines and rotors, as well as the helicopter's flight instruments.
Examination of components found that there was no evidence of any pre-impact failures, that all the mechanical systems, electronic systems, everything at that time appeared to be working fine.
The NTSB's Bill English has led investigations into some of the world's most notorious aviation accidents.
We need to cover all our bases on this one.
Knowing there's a high-profile person on board, obviously NTSB responded with a major investigations team.
Okay. He takes off at 9:07. He flies northwest.
To better understand what happened, investigators pieced together a detailed flight path from an ADS-B system that's on board the Sikorsky helicopter.
ADS-B data is like transponder data. Controllers can see it, it's recorded, your airspeed, altitude, and headings, other information. And so you have this plotting capability.
Look like there's some kind of hold here at Burbank, and he follows the I-5 to Van Nuys. And then south to the 101, which he follows until he makes this U-turn, straight into a hillside.
You see this turn to the left, where he's coming back around or doing something. And that question is now in the investigation. What's exactly the pilot doing here?
Let's take a look at the visibility.
They study visibility reports from weather stations along the route.
He did manage to avoid the worst of it here, a bit socked in near Burbank and Van Nuys, but nothing he can't get through.
He had 4 miles of visibility. When he got near Burbank Airport, it was 2.5 miles visibility. That's still totally flyable for him. In fact, by his operation specifications, he could go down to 1 mile visibility.
Okay, I get it if the visibility was down to 0, but this wasn't that bad. So what happened to this guy?
Why do we have a high-time pilot in an aircraft that's capable of flight, and visibility conditions he should have been able to handle, either lose control or somehow inadvertently fly his helicopter in the ground? That becomes the key piece of this investigation.
We need to figure out what he could actually see.
We have a request for the public. We're looking for photos of the weather in the area of the crash. If you could send those photos to witness@ntsb.gov.
Investigators make a plea to the public for evidence regarding the Island Express helicopter crash that took the lives of Kobe Bryant and 8 others. They're looking for clues to explain how the pilot, Ara Zobayan, ended up hitting a hillside on a route he knew well.
More than 8,300 flying hours. Instructor on the S-76. Chief pilot at Island Express. Apparently Kobe's favorite pilot.
Bit of a superstar.
This pilot was not a rookie who just got his license. He was one of LA's top helicopter pilots, working for one of its top companies with some of its most high-profile clients.
Records show that at 7 a.m. on the morning of the flight, Zobayan checked the weather for his pre-flight risk assessment and determined that even though there were low-hanging clouds blanketing the area, the flight was low risk.
A risk assessment is weather, anxiety, sleep, all these factors that go into a flight.
But a low-lying cloud layer surrounding Los Angeles, known as a marine layer, forced Zobayan to alter his regular, more direct route.
Because of the weather, he flew more inland than he normally does, sort of a backdoor way in to where they were going.
Based on the forecast, his plan was okay. Pretty good visibility all along the way. So what went wrong?
Investigators need to understand the exact conditions Zobayan flew into in the final moments of the flight.
These are 3 separate cameras all facing south toward the 101.
Couldn't ask for a better view.
The NTSB's plea for pictures of the weather pays off. A nearby baseball facility had surveillance cameras pointed at key sections of the flight path as the helicopter flew past.
Let's see what this one shows on a clear day.
Investigators compare images from the same camera taken on a clear day to images recorded at the time of the accident.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so 1 minute before the accident, the helicopter would be bombing along here. Can't see it. How close did it get to the camera?
Best view of it would be here. That's 4,400 feet.
The helicopter is less than a mile from the camera, but isn't visible.
Okay, so what about larger objects? These hills, for instance. Visible on a clear day, but not at the time of the crash.
That hilltop is 8,000 feet away.
So visibility beneath the clouds was less than 8,000 feet. It's a mile and a half.
The video study tells investigators that around the time of the accident, Zobayan would not have been able to see any further than 1.5 miles.
You're only allowed to fly in visibilities 1 mile or greater. 1.5 miles? Pretty low. Pretty minimal.
Investigators know Zobayan would have been able to fly safely below the clouds with 1.5 mile visibility.
So what if he was actually above the cloud base?
But he was only 450 feet above the ground.
The cloud ceiling, the base of the cloud layer, was reported to be 1,100 feet near Van Nuys. But Zobayan was flying about 450 feet above the ground, which would put him well below the clouds.
These are images from the camera on the 101 facing west.
Okay, you can just make him out here actually heading into fairly heavy clouds. Same camera, 3 seconds later, he's disappeared. And then we have a witness who says that she saw the helicopter disappear into what she described as a thick wall of heavy clouds.
The NTSB had quite a few very good witnesses, in my opinion, and they also had cameras in the area, so they could collect data in real time of what this pilot would have been encountering.
Their surveillance data shows him only 450 feet above the ground.
So the cloud base was no more than 450 feet above the ground, not the 1,100 feet which was being reported along his route.
The report at an airport 5 miles away can be greatly different than what you're encountering because of uplifting winds and that type of thing around the hills.
The area near Calabasas has its own unique climate. The Malibu Canyon can channel fog up from the Pacific Ocean. That fog is known to pool precisely where Zobayan was seen flying into clouds.
The fog gathers here at Merle Road, and this is where our witnesses saw him enter the clouds.
Investigators have determined that just over a minute before the accident, Zobayan flew into dense clouds that would have reduced his visibility to near zero.
That clinches it. He flew into IMC.
IMC, Instrument Meteorological Conditions, is when visibility is so poor that pilots need to fly only on instruments.
They were only authorized to fly under visual flight rules.
Legally, he's not allowed to enter it. He's only allowed to go in visual conditions only. And yet he did.
In aviation, there's a term for VFR pilots who fly into low visibility conditions. It's called an inadvertent encounter with IMC.
It can happen at night when you fly into a cloud that you didn't see. It can happen that you're choosing to avoid something and you inadvertently go into a cloud. Unfortunately, it's an accident that happens way too often.
Inadvertent IMC is a leading cause of aviation accidents over the past 10 years. More than 80% of them are fatal.
You can't see where the horizon is, and you can't see the sky from the ground. You don't know visually, which is our main sense. You have to rely on secondary senses, such as sense of balance, and there are illusions that come up.
An inadvertent encounter with instrument conditions is so potentially dangerous that pilots are trained to do whatever they can to avoid it.
How did he let himself get into this situation?
Let's see his speeds and altitudes.
The data from the ADSB gives investigators a detailed picture of the helicopter's altitude and speed as it approached Calabasas. If Zobayan tried to avoid the worsening conditions, the data would show it.
He's bombing along here at about 140 knots. Visibility's getting worse and worse, but he's not slowing down. He's not turning around, he just keeps going. Why?
He could have turned around, landed at Van Nuys. He could have circled for a while. We're near the airport waiting for the conditions to improve. For whatever reason we don't know, he chose none of those options.
The team now considers the widely held belief that Zobayan was pressured to continue the flight by his high-profile passenger.
A lot of people wondered after the crash happened if Kobe, being Kobe, might have put pressure on this pilot to get to where he wanted to go, because that's the whole reason that he was taking the helicopter in the first place, is to get from point A to point B and do it without any unnecessary delays.
The same passengers take the same flight the day before the accident. They're scheduled to take off at 9:45, but Kobe changes that to 9.
They moved it up by 45 minutes so that Kobe could watch another team or teams play in preparation for his daughter's basketball tournament on Sunday.
So they get airborne just after 9, and then this happens. They're held up for 12 minutes.
November 2, Echo X-ray, hold outside Burbank airspace. I have an aircraft going around in an inbound citation.
Investigators know that Kobe's helicopter was held up at Burbank for 12 minutes while Zobayan waited for traffic to clear the controlled airspace.
Okay, we'll hold outside Burbank, 2 Echo X-ray.
A little more than 10 minutes later, Zobayan flew into thick cloud cover at a speed of 160 miles an hour as he approached Camarillo.
In my opinion, 140 knots is probably twice the speed he should have been operating in those visual conditions. He should have slowed down.
Was he trying to make up for the lost time?
The team digs into Kobe Bryant's previous flights with Island Express to see if there's any history of him putting pressure on pilots.
He took 26 flights with Island Express last year. And not once did he pressure a pilot to keep going.
Kobe would never put pressure on a pilot. I flew him for 2 years. Not once was there ever any amount of pressure from him.
Investigators find no evidence that Kobe Bryant or any member of his team put pressure on Zobayan to continue the flight.
They had a history.
They scrutinize Kobe Bryant's relationship with Ara Zobayan for anything that could have affected the pilot's behavior on the day of the accident.
More than history. The director of operations says that Kobe's relationship with Ara was, quote, warm and friendly, that he trusted Ara with his girls and his family, and that they always wanted Ara. The company's VP says that their relationship was more like a friendship, and that Kobe would call him Mr. Pilot Man.
These guys sure were tight.
The relationship may have been pressure enough.
How's everyone doing today?
Investigators conclude that Zobayan's close relationship with Kobe Bryant may have led to self-induced pressure to get him to his destination.
Part of the concern here is that the pilot was trying to complete the mission in part to satisfy the client.
Investigators soon find another important factor that may have influenced Zobayan's decision-making.
6 minutes before the crash, he clears Van Nuys airspace and heads south. Tells controllers that he planned to stay low all the way to Camarillo.
Stay below the clouds.
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray.
Are you just gonna stay down that low all the way to Camarillo?
Yes, sir. Low altitude, 2 Echo X-ray.
2 minutes later, he starts following the 101, which should lead him straight into Camarillo. He bounds along the 101 for 2 more minutes until he hits this wall of clouds. 24 miles to go. He's almost there.
Almost.
Zobayan was less than 10 minutes away from getting his passengers to their destination.
When you're close to finishing, you have a tendency to be willing to tolerate conditions that might have caused you not to take the trip originally.
The team believes Zobayan was suffering from a condition known as plan continuation bias when he decided to keep going despite deteriorating weather conditions.
Plan continuation bias is an unconscious bias to continue with the original plan even when conditions change. But in an aviation environment, it can be deadly.
It doesn't take long for things to start going wrong as soon as he enters that cloud.
Instead of turning around, Zobayan decides to climb above the clouds.
We're gonna go ahead and start our climb to go above the layers.
He starts banking further and further left, descends rapidly, hits the hill here.
The pilot's unusual actions lead investigators to wonder about the level of training he received.
He was trained to avoid IMC and what to do if he got into it.
They discover that Zobayan was well trained to escape the precise conditions he flew into.
This pilot trained routinely for inadvertent IMC situation. More than that, he was the chief pilot of the company. He set the safety standards for all the pilots, and he trained them on how to deal with instrument conditions.
This is what he was taught.
A review of Zobayan's training shows that he was taught to reduce his speed, use the autopilot to climb above the clouds, and then declare an emergency.
His training was good.
But did Zobayan follow his training?
Here he's entering an area of low visibility. Still flying well above 100 knots. No evidence of slowing down.
Investigators know Zobayan did not reduce speed. They now wonder if he engaged the autopilot.
Play.
We're gonna go ahead and start our climb to go above the layers.
Look at that rate of climb. 1,500 feet a minute. Can't be the autopilot doing that.
That exceeds the authority of the autopilot system. Therefore, this climb was being manually controlled.
All right. Well, at this point, he's just trying to get above the clouds without the autopilot.
The higher Zobayan climbs into the dense cloud, the worse the visibility gets. But he never asks for help.
Well, he never reports an emergency and never mentions being in IMC.
The one thing he should have been saying, mayday, 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 declaring emergency, in for an IMC.
He didn't slow down, he didn't use his autopilot, and never declared an emergency.
He ignored all his training.
There are basic procedures that should be followed, and you have to have a very cautious approach to any sort of instrument conditions. This was not evident in the way the pilot flew that day.
By ignoring his training, Zobayan found himself in a rapid climb with no visibility and without the help of the autopilot. Prime conditions for becoming spatially disoriented. Anne-Marie Landman studies the effects of spatial disorientation in pilots.
If you take away outside visual reference from a pilot, then he or she will really have to trust the instruments. Because if you don't have outside visual reference, then any sensation that you feel can be very misleading.
Did Ara Zobayan suffer the effects of disorientation after flying into dense clouds?
2 Echo X-ray, say intentions.
Zobayan's last words show that's precisely what happened.
We're climbing to 4,000, 2 Echo X-ray.
Did you hear that? It's like he completely lost his bearings.
The recording tells investigators that Zobayan believed he was climbing when he was actually descending rapidly towards the ground in a steep left turn. It's what aviators call the graveyard spiral.
To ride that aircraft? No. In a mountainous area, you're none. You're absolutely none.
The team has pieced together a picture of a pilot who flew into prime conditions for causing disorientation.
Zobayan's problem starts just after he flies into the cloud. He decides the best thing to do is to fly above it.
But as he climbs, visibility worsens, and his reference to the highway below and the horizon ahead quickly disappear. It's all but impossible for pilots to determine a plane's pitch and roll without a visual reference to their surroundings. Without visual cues, the human body is unable to maintain its spatial bearings. The result is disorientation. As the highway below veers left, Zobayan tries to stay with it. He puts the helicopter into a gradual left turn.
He's not looking at the instruments at this point. He was perhaps looking down to search for the highway that he was following before.
2 Echo X-ray ident.
Zobayan now faces a distraction that makes the situation significantly worse.
Hi, Dent.
He is forced to identify himself to the controller. It's not only a distraction, it forces him to move his head, which increases the risk of disorientation.
We advise pilots to not move their head around when they're flying without outside visual reference. This is moving the fluid in your inner ears, and this actually makes you a little bit more susceptible to illusions.
The highway now veers off to the right, but he's lost sight of it. He's banking further and further to the left without even realizing it.
30 seconds from impact.
Disorientation sets in.
The turn is so gradual and it is so slow that the onset, it seems that he's not feeling that. So for him, it still feels that he's flying level.
And he gets to 1,600 feet and he starts to descend without even knowing it.
It's clear that prior to the accident, the pilot really did not know what the helicopter was doing, because he was asked his intentions and he indicated that he was climbing to 4,000 feet.
We're climbing to 4,000 to Echo X-ray.
At that point, the helicopter was not climbing. It was descending towards a crash, and the pilot didn't realize it.
He's now in a rapid descent, and likely looking for clear skies above, not noticing what his instruments are showing.
Without having outside visual references and not being focused on your instruments, it's very easy for that to happen, and it does happen far too often.
He's so far over, it's like he lost all his lift. He's plummeting to the ground.
Graveyard spiral. Classic.
About a minute after entering the clouds, he hits the ground like this, almost on his side, at more than 160 knots. There's no sign he ever figured out what was really happening.
Kobe Bryant and 8 others died as a result of an all-too-common scenario. A helicopter pilot flying IMC and becoming disoriented.
We need something to help pilots understand that just because you feel like your body is being pushed down on the seat doesn't mean you're climbing.
That device exists, and it's helping train pilots in the Netherlands. The one-of-a-kind simulator lets researchers reproduce the feeling of spatial disorientation without pilots having to leave the ground.
Hi, Roger.
Okay, Martin, so how are you feeling now?
Feeling pitched up.
You're feeling pitched up?
Yeah.
Investigators hoping to prevent the kind of accident that caused Ara Zobayan to get so badly disoriented are looking closely at the work being done in labs like this one at the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research, or TNO.
We investigate the effects of spatial disorientation on pilot performance.
Zobayan believed he was climbing when he was actually descending and was unaware that he was in a steep left turn. He was suffering from 2 of the most common illusions affecting pilots: somatogravic, involving his sense of pitch, and somatogyral, involving his sense of roll.
Spatial disorientation is a factor in about 30% of fatal helicopter crashes.
This rotating chair helps pilots experience the effect of the leans, the inability to recognize that you are in a steep turn.
When a pilot starts a turn, the fluid in the inner ear responds, and it's telling that he or she is in a turn. But after a while, the fluid sort of settles, so it actually feels as if they're flying level again.
This pilot is using his thumbs to show the direction he believes he's turning. For the first few seconds, he's right. But as the fluid in his ear settles, he no longer senses the turn. This is the identical illusion that Ara Zobayan experienced. It's why he never realized that he had entered a gradual left turn once he lost sight of the highway below, even though his instruments would have been telling him precisely that.
We train them here to really trust their instruments and to really be focused on their instruments, especially in situations of low visibility.
But the heart of TNO's facility is this simulator called Desdemona.
Okay, so here's what's going to happen. You just have to wait for our mark, and then you just have to level the aircraft. But you have to do that without the instruments, so only based on your gut feeling.
It's a disorientation demonstrator, which safely simulates the effects of pitch and roll illusions on pilots. It's the only one in the world.
Okay, Martin, so first you're just going to fly a little bit to get acquainted with the controls, all right?
Right,
so, yeah, so you have the instruments available.
Yep.
Okay, let's start the simulation.
Unlike simulators that are attached to the ground, Desdemona can simulate unlimited degrees of pitch, yaw, and roll, as well as the forces of acceleration.
It's really important to have a simulator that can really create a constant force, or constant force that feels like acceleration.
Do you decline?
Continuing climb.
Pilot Martin Kemner is about to experience the same sensation that Zobayan felt moments before the crash. The instruments in the simulator are turned off, so he must rely only on feel.
Martin, how are you feeling now?
I'm feeling straight and level.
Let's ramp up the acceleration and see how that feels. Now we're starting the centrifuge, and the cabin of the simulator is pointing towards the center. So for Martin, it actually just feels like he's accelerating forward.
The acceleration causes him to mistake what is actually happening.
Okay, Martin, what are you feeling now?
A bit pitched up.
And what do you think that the aircraft is doing now?
We're climbing now.
If you're accelerating forwards, yeah, the little hairs in your inner ear will actually give a constant signal that is the same as if you're being pitched up.
We're climbing to 4,000 to Echo X-ray.
It's the exact illusion that caused Ara Zobayan to believe he was still climbing when his helicopter was in a steep descent.
So can you now bring the nose back to level?
Yep, sure.
So you can see that he's bringing the nose below the horizon. For him, this actually feels level. So shall we show him the instruments?
Oh my God. I'm 20 degrees nose down.
Okay, can you recover? We hope that this helps them to recognize spatial disorientation when it occurs. Secondly, we also hope to teach them some skills that help them to manage spatial disorientation if it occurs.
Wow, that was it.
Crazy,
it was crazy.
I believe that as a tribute to the victims of this accident, the industry needs to realize how common and sinister these effects can be and develop better safety standards.
As a result of NTSB recommendations, the Federal Aviation Administration is evaluating tools like Desdemona that can be used to train more pilots how to recognize and cope with the effects of disorientation.
The last thing the NTSB wants to do is go back and investigate this kind of accident all over again. And through the death of this person and people on board, hopefully this will be the one to help improve safety. Time will tell.